Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Mike Grinberg. Mike is the founder of Proofpoint Marketing, a positioning consultancy that works primarily with boutique firms in regulated industries, like think life sciences, financial services, med tech. Now, I wanted to have Mike on because selfishly, we think about positioning very similarly. Mike's take on positioning is that he doesn't treat it as a messaging problem, he treats it as a business design problem. But in addition, he also has a great way of viewing positioning through the lens of de-risking, like de-risking the buying decision. And it's incredibly helpful. In this episode, we discuss why positioning is an operating system, not a marketing problem, the 4-box risk matrix that agencies can use to understand how buyers evaluate them, why personal risk matters more than organizational risk in most deals, and more. No one was asking for another community, but I've made one anyway. So what's different? The dynamic agency community is designed around access rather than content. Access to peers who've done it before. Access to experts who've designed solutions. Access to resources that have been battle tested. And right now, the price for founding members is only $97 a year. Join today so your agency has immediate access to everything you need to grow. You can join at dynamicagency.community. And now, Mike Grinberg. It's easier than ever to start an agency, but it's only getting harder to stand out and keep it alive. Join me as we explore the strategies agencies are using today to secure a better tomorrow. This is Agency Forward. What made you see positioning as an operations problem and not just marketing?
So I'll tell you, there's a personal side to it where the initial iteration of Proofpoint was a demand gen agency. My wife and I ran that for a number of years. And then we ended up winding it down a couple of years back. And toward the end of that, I knew that we were struggling with positioning, what I believe positioning to be. And all the kind of telltale signs were there. We were losing deals last minute. We were struggling to get a kind of consistent inbound. It's not that there wasn't there, but not consistent quality. Mm-hmm. The referrals that we would get, very few of them were like the best ones. We'd get referrals. They just didn't feel like the right ones all the time. So meaning the clients didn't really know how to describe us or what we actually, or at least they knew how to describe us in what they saw, but not in what we wanted, right? Mm-hmm. So that gap was there. So we worked through a number of things. First we made the mistake of going, it's a messaging thing. So we brought up a messaging consultant or two actually. That did absolutely nothing. It was very clearly just veneer. It wasn't their fault. They did their work. They did what they were hired for. We just hired the wrong thing. And then we're like, okay, well, let's bring on an expert that's an expert in positioning. So we did that. We spent a decent amount of money on it. And same thing though. I was kind of left going, that's it. Like this is what we call positioning. I'm kind of in the same place. I don't feel like I'm any better off for doing this work. We maybe more clearly defined our ICP, but barely. It just didn't feel like we got anywhere. Right. So that led me down this. And then one more thing, I mentioned we're losing deals last minute. I posted about this on LinkedIn actually not too long ago, but a very specific example. We had an inbound lead that came in. Everything was going great, and it was going to be like the biggest deal. I mean, at that point, we were, pushing toward $2 million in revenue. This was going to be a north of $250,000 deal at the base, so it was a big deal,
right?
And everything was going well. Like, the CRO was the champion. We had I'd met the entire executive team. We were they were nodding along. Everybody, we scoped everything together. Contracts were sent. CFO was in red lines. We were talking about payment terms at this point. That was the only kind of minor sticking point. and then they go dark. And then a little bit after that, they're like, oh, and I knew that they were kind of choosing between two prospective partners, but it seemed like they were literally asking us like, oh, well, should we work with them and you, or should we work with you first? Like, it's almost like they were asking us like how best to make this work. I'm like, okay, cool. This is in the bag.
Right.
And they go, we went a different direction. Shit. What the hell just happened? And I'll kind of get to the point, the punchline here. After doing like a post-mortem conversation and all that, it became very clear that it was buyer risk. They did not feel comfortable enough because we were an unknown to them. Like, it was inbound. They learned, they saw some of our stuff. They got introduced to my director of demand, director of growth at the time. The conversation started, and then I get involved. So we were a no name. And through that whole process, they just didn't feel comfortable enough. And our champion didn't feel comfortable enough fighting for us because the CEO was the one that decided to go in a different direction last minute. And that's where I go, okay, this is the problem. It's risk. So what does that mean? Why? Right. Mm-hmm. And that's what made me dive into all the, decision science stuff. And I'd always been interested in it. So like, Kahneman's work and prospect theory and paradox of choice and all that, all those books and whatnot. And that's where I realized the problem isn't the message. You can say whatever you want on the front end, but there's got to be proof throughout everything, including the sales process, which we didn't have. That was the problem there because obviously they weren't a client yet. But then afterwards, it's the delivery side of things, which is what you communicate in your sales process, needs to also show that, right? Mm-hmm. And we just didn't have it. There wasn't really that core differentiator there. We talked about, at that point we were talking about, we were calling relationship-led growth and whatnot, but there wasn't any supporting material, if you will, right? There's nothing about our staffing model or process that would have shown that, there's actually something supporting this thing that we say that we do. Right. And that's what led me down this whole rabbit hole of, okay, positioning isn't the message. It's the business. Mm-hmm. It's everything about the business, delivery, business development, hiring, strategy, all that jazz.
Yeah. I think so I get very frustrated when I see positioning coaches who are just doing the messaging. Because I think like the huge issue there is like, it doesn't matter if we change the headline of our website. As soon as they start going into those one-on-one conversations or they start working with us, like if we, for some reason, want to be the fastest agency, and as soon as we have to deliver something a month out, it's like, we just lost all credibility. Like, you're not the fastest agency.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite example to use because it's so easy to illustrate.
Right. Yeah. And I would never recommend someone choose being the fastest. That's because like anytime you use an EST, it's really hard, I think, to if someone just says, well, who's second place? And if you don't know who's second place, how do you know you're first? And
so you don't claim fastest, but you but if you claim speed, right? Speed to market, right?
Which is one of those whatever triangle, right? Like of speed, quality, or price. Yeah. And so like it is one of those core elements you can choose. But yeah, so I guess, so what I like about the idea of like de-risking, right? And thinking through it that way, it's like literally everything that you could be doing within your business to just show up the way you want to be seen can help with the de-risking process. Mm-hmm. What are those, I don't know, like what's like the low hanging fruit for like an agency that wants to just like enact this right now? What are the things that they could do to start de-risking potential sales engagements and stuff so people feel better going into this?
Yeah. I think probably the biggest thing is understanding the how your buyers perceive risk.
Okay.
And more specifically, understanding how they view personal risk. So especially if you're selling to like really like VSMBs, like very small businesses that it still exists, but it's a little bit the personal risk and the organizational risk tend to kind of merge, I think, to a certain extent. It's not that not that it's not valuable, but it's not as valuable maybe. But any organization of any sort of size or whatever, even like if it's a 10-person firm that you're selling into, you have that, right? Because you're not selling to one person, you're probably selling to multiple. There's usually a boss or an owner or a board that they're reporting into. There is personal risk. And I've done countless buyer research interviews across the spectrum of industries at this point. And there hasn't been a single time I can think of that some level of personal risk was not discussed. And it's always in terms of them protecting themselves. It's always CYA.
Right.
Which, again, it shouldn't be surprising to anybody. That's, again, going into decision science. That's where prospect theory comes from. Right? We're going to protect what we have rather than take a big risk. At least a lot of us, not everybody. I mean, there are risk taking is on a spectrum, et cetera. But unless you're selling to VCs, that's their MO, they're much less likely to be risk takers. And especially if you're not selling to the founder themselves, right? Because founders tend to be a little bit higher on the risk taking spectrum just by nature of being the person that started the business. But outside of that, your VP of R&D, their first priority is to make sure they don't lose that VP of R&D title at that company.
Right. Yeah. So it's the higher up the chain you go, the more organizational risk is going to influence that. But I do think once you realize that status plays a role in every single decision, it's so much easier to go in and just say, okay, if this is the champion, right, I got to get them selling on my behalf. What would actually make them look good in this engagement and make it so that they feel there's no risk here.
But it's understanding like what is it that they find risky. So I'll give you an example. I just did a project in the banking space. So I interviewed banking CFOs and chief risk officers. And a common thread in that one was that unless the firm, and again, my client's a boutique firm, unless the firm is known to the regulators, they're going to proceed as a risk because they don't want to bring this up to the board, get somebody hired, and then the regulator goes, oh, well, yeah, I don't know who that is. I don't trust this opinion. Right. So what's a way to de-risk that? Again, so the answer to your question is going to be different for everybody to a certain extent, but the core is understanding what's behind that personal risk side of things. And the solution for them is, well, get known to more regulators. And there's a bunch of things you can do to do that. So that's an example of it.
Right. So I guess what's the process for uncovering that? Are you doing customer interviews? Are you
buyer research interviews. So I try I try to stay away from customer interviews because they inevitably become biased. As much as possible, I want to talk to other people like their customers, but that haven't actually worked with the firm yet. Because that allows me to get into, I can ask them anything and they're going to tell me more unadulterated stuff because they're not going, oh, well, I don't want to hurt, so-and-so's feelings or whatever it is. Like there's just, there's biases inevitably from the client.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's where even just you doing it instead of your client being the one to go out and do it is going to change those.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like if we were going to interview clients, like, yes, it's,
I've known
if you can afford it, right, there's budget involved, but if you can afford it, definitely get a third party to do all of this work for a variety of reasons. One is they probably know how to interview better. At least they should. And two, it removes much more of the bias that would exist otherwise.
Right. Yeah. And I think I was talking to someone about this recently, but it was like, there's a piece when you go into, as a third party, go into the conversation and say like, check out, I'm not sharing who said anything, but like when you give me the bad stuff, it helps me with also making sure that we're going to fix that for them. So like, it's all good stuff that you're going to give me. You get way more control over that conversation. Okay, so we do the buyer's research. We have an idea of what risk means to the potential buyer. How do we go about rolling this out within the business?
So once you understand what the risk is, and again, I look at it as risk as a 4-box matrix. So think about it like you have on the x-axis you have personal risk, organizational risk. On the y-axis is you have internal, external. So internal skepticism, external questioning. The internal, external is also important because internal is like they're going through it in their own minds. External, they're bringing other people in and they're questioning it inside the buying committee usually, or
Right.
peers, etc. So kind of understanding that, and it kind of goes through. You have the first question you got to answer is, well, like, do I feel comfortable that they, meaning the agency or the consulting firm, are going to deliver for me, right? That's the CYA piece. Then the next question is, do I have what I need, or do I feel comfortable that I'm gonna be able to answer questions from my peers or from my team about them? Right. That was, so if you think back to my example that I mentioned, where my prospective client just lost me, I lost them last minute. That was part of the problem. There was just not enough confidence for the CRO to fight for it, even though she wanted to work with us in theory, to fight for it. When the CEO decided to go the other direction. So then you get into organizational stuff, which is, have you delivered for a company like mine? And do I feel that you're going to get me to the promised land, if you will? That's the funny part is most people want to start at that last one. And that's not that it's the least important, but if you start there and you miss all the other ones, that's where you end up getting ghosted last minute. And you're like, what just happened? I thought we were good. You saw my case studies and you like them. Doesn't matter.
Right. There's an order of operations to it.
Yeah. So once you understand how your champion in the buying committee sees risk about organizations like yours, then you start looking at, okay, well, what do I need to do to answer these various questions? Right. So, as an example, like the example I was talking about earlier, okay, well, we need to get known by more regulators. What can that be? Well, there's a functional component to this. We probably need to have more regulators on staff, or as, 1099 consultants or whatever, because those former regulators will know current regulators, which makes you just the network kind of expand that way, right? That's a functional thing. The other thing is you probably need to start creating content that's, quote unquote, regulator friendly, right? That's going to get the regulators interested in, reading and whatever, and seeing you as the, an expert in the field. Okay. Well, again, that could take up a bunch of different forms, but that's a thing. You probably need to ensure that, regulatory stuff is included in your service offering and the kind of the core delivery component, right? And again, this isn't banking, but I've had a similar kind of thing in life sciences space with biotech, like pretty much any regulated industry. Let's just say it's a common type thing. But so that there isn't one answer. Again, the nuance is, once you understand it and you understand that 4-question framework, you can start going, okay, well, what are the functional things I need to change? What are is there IP I maybe need to kind of flesh out and create that makes me known to the right people? So known to the regulators in this case. And then how do I then evangelize it and get that in front of them, right? And then all these things tend to connect. So again, the functional thing might be, we need regulators on staff. Well, now, and then we need to create this IP. And then the go-to-market piece is, okay, well, let's get these regulators that we have on staff. Let's get them speaking engagements, talking about this IP, and then at conferences that regulators go to. Now you've just connected all the dots as an example.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm loving it. Every time we chat, I realize how in sync we are with thoughts. We have different ways of talking about everything. I look at like there's 11 levers for like differentiation,
Yeah.
and you just brought up a lot of them. And when I think about it, it's like they all do the de-risking, right? Like
Mhm.
our economic model is one of the ways we can differentiate. But like
Yeah.
really, if we have the right economic model, we can de-risk for our buyer. And so it's another way
Mhm.
to do this. Our operational
Yeah.
constraints, right? Saying, yeah, we're a web agency. We will not do your SEO content. We're not writing blogs for you. We only focus on
Mhm.
this so we can be the best at this. That
Mhm.
de-risks it for the right buyer.
Yeah.
And so it all ultimately does come down to the act of de-risking in this process.
Yeah.
Yeah, just crazy.
It's a different frame, right? I mean, I
Yeah,
think I'm definitely not like you said, like you and I think about it differently. I talk about it in the frame of de-risking, and for some people that like something clicks,
right,
right? And again, for my audience, here's actually an example. I tend to work not originally not on purpose, um, but I tend to work with firms that are in regulated industries, so life sciences, financial
mhm,
services, med tech, etc. Um, and that's actually where, for that matter, partially the de-risking kind of came from those industries because that's what they do, specifically in the med tech that
right,
engineering firm I worked with. Like they have to literally de-risking is a job that they need to do at each
right,
stage of the product development journey. So that's partially where I got some of that language from, or borrowed, I guess you could say. Um, but it also resonates with those types of people because they just get it. They're like, oh, de-risking, yeah, we do that. That makes sense. But that's
right,
an example of on the front end where the language does matter. I don't want to say it doesn't, but it
mhm,
only matters if my services also then say, well, you do this service to de-risk this decision. You do this service to de-risk this decision, which is exactly how I position
mhm,
my services. Right. And then
right.
they
You got
get
to
it.
be able to walk the
Yeah.
talk. Um, so, I guess how do you test your positioning? Like if we say, all right, this is what we want to be seen as. This is how we feel we're being presented. Um, what's next? Like how do we know that we've actually achieved this?
Just real quick. Sorry.
It
This thing
says on
is
my
saying trying to reconnect,
yeah.
make sure you have a stable internet connection. Are you seeing that on your end?
Yeah, let's just. I think we can just keep running. Hopefully,
All right.
it
I
should
don't,
be
it's weird because it
recording
seems
locally.
fine, but
Yeah.
although
No,
it's possible that my daughter unplugged the router. Well, no, it couldn't be the router, but maybe
yeah, we're still on. So
one of the spots, whatever. She's
yeah.
16 months. She unplugs everything she can find. Anyway, sorry, repeat the question.
um, how do we test
Oh yeah.
our
How do you test?
positioning?
Um, so I'm a big fan of, I don't want to say throw shit against the wall and see what sticks, but once you go through the process of thinking, well, identifying like what the potential issue is and understanding risk, identifying like the structure and the infrastructure that needs to be developed, then just start and then well, and then you develop the message, right? Because at the end of the day, that's for you're you're going to test it in two places: net new and existing clients, right? On the net new side, you are going to test it through messaging because your goal is
Yep.
this going to resonate with them? They don't know me yet. The only thing they have to go on is what I'm putting out there, right? Now, if
Mhm.
they're a referral, it's a little bit different, obviously. But I just like even as the process is still rolling, I like to start putting stuff out on LinkedIn or whatever channel you're leveraging, right?
Mhm.
Like if you're gonna spend a bunch of time creating a like an IP asset of sorts, whether that's a some sort of assessment or a model or a can be a white paper, but not like the crappy ones that don't tell you anything, but like something that's actually deep and makes people think, etc. Whatever
Mhm.
it is, I just like starting to test stuff out. I like to start testing things in conversations as I'm whatever at networking events or um, even in like speaking engagements and things like that. Just start tweaking some of that stuff, and then with existing clients, um, two things. One is that is where I would go. Okay, how do you see us? Like we want to be seen in this way. How
Mhm.
do you see us? Right. And again, as we talked about, ideally it's a third party that does that. And there you identify what's the current gap, right, within my existing client base. And then you start going, okay, well, how do I close this?
Right. So I always find that's the challenging part of, right, just like getting those conversations to pull the right words from someone
Yep.
to see, okay, are we actually being seen there, and to be able to close that gap. I don't know if anyone has like a bulletproof way to just quickly get that from someone, or it's just,
I don't know. I mean, the couple of questions I like to ask is, and I got this one from, I think it was Max Trailer a long time ago, but like when I'm doing client interviews for somebody else, I'll go, hey, if I was this type of, if I had this type of problem, um, sorry, I take that back. I'll do two things. When I'm talking to my client, I'll ask them, if you were to introduce me to a reference, who would it be, and then why? Right. So one, I want to understand how they actually see themselves, and like why this person versus a different person. And then when I talk to that person, then I go, okay, how would you just, like, if you were going to refer somebody for such and such agency or consulting firm or whatever, what would you put in your referral email? Because that gets them to go, okay, well, I would say X, Y, and Z, and then we dive into that, right? Is it a bulletproof way? No, of course not. Not even close. But that's sort of how I tend to approach it.
Yep. Yeah, and it's more active. Because like I know passively you can do the whole, when we get on sales calls and people are using the right words back to us that we're trying to lean into with our marketing, it's like, okay, like we're obviously moving the right track, but that could also just be that they've heard you use those words, and
it could just be mirroring. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And so, hard to do that. It's, I guess, how would you, so I mean, like besides like just using LinkedIn and kind of posting as we go to like see, are there any other things you would do to pressure test your positioning, even just to make sure that it's aligned with what you want to?
So again, because positioning is everything to a certain extent, for lack of a better word. Let's say part of what we're doing to support the positioning is redesigning services and pricing. I'm going to take a small subset of my existing client base. I'm going to go, hey, we're making this change. How do you feel about, moving over to this new pricing structure? Right. It's simple things like that, because if they go, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, I think we're onto something. Versus, no way. It probably means one of two things. Either A, we got that wrong, or B, they're the wrong type of client.
Right. Yeah. So
I wouldn't do it with everybody. I wouldn't go, hey, you got 50 clients. Let's get everybody. Let's message everybody, because then you're liable to, tank your business all of a sudden.
Right.
But you take whatever. Again, this gets into also the founder's kind of risk profile. 5%, 10%, maybe 20% at most. Right. Again, depends on the size and, whatever, and kind of go from there.
Right. Yeah. So,
and I would also kind of with that, one other thing is I would look at, okay, let's define, because part of the process defining who your ICP is. Okay. Let's take a small group that we believe is not your ICP and propose this to them, because that gives you one.
Right, trial it with them.
Well, you trial it because they might go, oh, well, that actually maybe makes sense. So maybe you got them, maybe you labeled them wrong, or that's an easy way for them to exit, after a while.
Yeah.
And you kind of prove, either way, it proves that. And then you do it with your best clients, the same kind of thing. Like if your best client goes, God, no, why would I want to do that? You're like, ooh, okay, maybe we're missing something.
Yeah, right. Then you give them you're right. That was just a joke. We would never consider that. All right. So what's the 80-20 here? If someone had to focus on one thing that they could be doing to improve their business's positioning today, where would you send them? What would they do?
I would 100% say do the buyer research. I think I have yet to come into a boutique firm where they have, number one, even formally done any of it. If they've done anything, they've talked to their own clients, which just means they've, not saying it's not worthwhile, but there's a bunch of bias there. And they likely missed asking certain questions that are probably important. So I would for sure invest in that.
All right.
That'd be probably the number one place.
Got it. So 2 more questions as we start winding down here. First one, what book do you recommend every agency owner should read?
Good question. Lately, a lot of my conversations have been focused on business development, and that's where I tend to recommend Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably that.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good one. And then last questions, where can people find you?
LinkedIn's the best one.
Awesome. Too easy. Mike, thanks for joining.
Yeah, this is great.
That's the show, everyone. You can leave a rating and review, or you can do something that benefits you. Click the link in the show notes to subscribe to Agency Forward on Substack. You'll get weekly content, resources, and links from around the internet to help you drive your agency forward.